I think prices have actually jumped up a little bit on the news of this release. The prices did fall previously to this. Now, what exactly is driving that? Was it the expectations of the SPR release? I think also there's other news going on, particularly to do with the lockdowns in Europe, resurgence of COVID. I think that's probably more of a concern that was pushing down prices beforehand. And I think the market has looked at this and said, this is not so much a release of the SPR. This is more borrowing from the SPR. A lot of this oil will be returned over the months to come. So yes, it pushes down the prompt price perhaps, but future prices will have to rise a bit to compensate. So overall, to be honest, I think no big impact. I think this is about politics and optics more than having a serious impact on the oil market.
Robin, I think you got it. I wanted to get your reaction to what Dan Brewer told us just a few moments ago. He says Biden is facing a political emergency, and that's what this is responding to. Would you agree?
Emergency, I think, look, a lot of this stuff is a bit overblown, to be honest. I mean, $80 a barrel, it's not a particularly high oil price in context. When we last had the major SPR release in 2011 in the middle of the Libyan revolution, we were at $110 a barrel plus, and that was, of course, 10 years ago with inflation in the meantime. So the current oil prices, they're a bit above the historical average. They're not remarkably high. Obviously, there's kind of wider concerns about inflation. But no, I think this is just about temporarily trying to ease gasoline prices over the holiday period.
Robin, what we've also seen is OPEC resisting US calls to pump more. How much of that resistance actually impacted this decision? And what do you think it means for OPEC Plus policy coming into their meeting next week?
Well, yes, look, I think there obviously was an idea in this trying to put pressure on OPEC Plus, and that's also, of course, why you have China, Japan, other major oil consumers involved in the release as well. That's interesting because this is not an International Energy Agency coordinated release, but it is a coordinated release between a number of major consuming countries. So that's pretty interesting. That obviously is, particularly having China on board, it's a signal to OPEC Plus, don't push things too far. But I think OPEC Plus will look at the market balances and say, well, there's now more oil in the market. Probably no need to particularly hurry on bringing back production. They'll probably stick to their target of 400,000 barrels per day being added each month. But it certainly, I think, would cool off any idea that they might have had of adding more.
And Robin, it's Hadley here. I mean, when you think about this, in a sense, I was saying this to Dan earlier, I mean, in a geopolitical sense, it was impressive that President Biden was able to coordinate with the Chinese and the Japanese and South Koreans and others in terms of releasing these crude reserves at the same time, or the plan to do so. Do you see that happening in future? Is this going to start to become a knee-jerk reaction, in your view, to any problem with prices? Because it didn't inflation is going to go away.
Yeah, well, look, I think inflation will probably ease off, but that is an interesting question. Have we now moved into a new phase in which the SPR and other strategic stocks are used as market management? The Chinese have done this for a long time, of course, not just in oil, but in other commodities. They have been quite ready to make strategic releases to try to manipulate the market and cool prices when they thought they were too high, and conversely that they buy when it's low. So they've used their SPR much more actively than the US uses its reserve. The US reserve has always been thought of as an emergency. We're certainly not in an emergency now, not a market emergency anyway. So that is interesting, this idea of coordinating these actions, yeah.